Namaste, Bindu. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who is tuning in now or in the future. A huge thank you to Pari and to Patriji, who are actually joining us on the Coalition for Global Unity this Monday and next Monday, who invited me to be here with you, and to the Spiritual Science International Meet. I'm so thankful to be able to share the stage with all of the incredible teachers here with us today. I thought a really fun way to begin today would be to share a lesson from one of my teachers, a Kabbalistic teacher named Moshe. I remember one day sitting in class, and Moshe shared with us, he said, sometimes life gives us people, situations, hardships, pain. And it's as though these people, these situations, are like a letter addressed personally to us. I want you to imagine you're receiving a letter and it's addressed to you. Your name's right there on that letter, except instead of a letter, it's pain, it's a loss, it's the coronavirus, whatever it is that you might be going through in your life. And what Moshe said is, unfortunately, most of us resist the letters that we receive. So I want you to imagine that before we came into this plane, we made a deal with the universe. We said, universe, I'm in, pick me of all the souls. I want to be the one, choose me. Though we made a deal with the universe that we forget when we incarnate so that we can play this game called life. And in this game called life, down here in Soul School, there are certain lessons that we need to expand our soul to our greatest potential. And so what happens is, as Moshe so clearly put it, when we get a letter, or which is a situation or person or hardship in our life that is provided to us for our growth and development, and we hit return to sender, oh no, universe, God, you got it wrong. So sorry, this was not meant for me. This hardship, this pandemic thing, you got the wrong girl. So you can only imagine what happens when we do this. We return that letter to the universe. Well, what does the universe do? The universe says, no, Jennifer, remember, we made that agreement before you incarnated. And so you actually want to receive this letter. So I'm going to send you 100 more of these letters. Well, this keeps going and going until your mail piles up, until one day, what do? You open the letter. The moment that we open the letter, how do we even open the letter? We open the letter by asking the universe, what is the lesson? What is the lesson that I am meant to learn today? When we ask about that lesson, the pain, the situation, the circumstance transforms or disappears. So why do I start today with this? Today here at the Spiritual Science International Meet, why are we talking about the story of the universe and the obstacles that we sometimes find ourselves faced with? Because today I'm going to be talking to you about book 2, as they just mentioned, 101 Spiritual Tools for Uncertain Times. And in this book, I dive into numerous tools. In fact, I'll tell you the story. It was kind of funny of how it came about. I was in Paris on March 11th. In fact, we had done a global coherence meditation right before the peak of the pandemic on March 9th with world leaders from around the world. And we had 100,000 of us meditating simultaneously on that March 9th. March 11th, I go to bed as planned. I'm still in Paris. March 12th, I wake up to 60 text messages from friends around the world saying, get out of Paris, things are changing, you got to get yourself somewhere safe. And the first thing that I could think of to do, I was by myself, was to hop on the first train to London. So that's what I did. Though in that moment, I went from this expanded consciousness of the global coherence meditation we did to contracting from a place of fear and doubt, and this shouldn't be this way. And as it sometimes happens, I got ill. So for about 3 to 4 weeks when I was here in London by myself initially, I was terribly ill. And on the 30th day of being by myself and quarantining, I woke up and I realized I survived it. I survived being terribly ill. Whether I had the virus or not is irrelevant. I was going through my own experience of pain and suffering, and I needed it to be able to get to where I was to write this new book. And as I sat there, I realized I didn't just survive it, I thrived. Even when I was feeling my worst, every day I would spend anywhere from 4 to 8 hours in prayer, meditation, reflection. And I realized, wow, how lucky am I? How fortunate am I that I have all of these spiritual tools in my proverbial spiritual tool belt? And it actually made me think of a story that one of my other teachers had once shared with me. He said, Jennifer, Imagine that all around us is light, infinite light. Now, you can call that light blessings, miracles, prosperity, health, whatever you want to call it. However, the only problem with the light is you need a source, a plug to get into that light that is all around you. And at the time that I first had heard this from my teacher, I was studying transcendental meditation. I had begun to study Kabbalah. I was going to the Agape International Spiritual Center. And what my teacher explained is he said, Jen, it's great because every one of those things you're doing is like plugging in, using another plug to the infinite light that's all around you. And that's when I was sitting on my couch after a meditation in London that it dawned on me. I wanted to share these tools. I was so lucky to have so many tools at my disposal. I want to be clear though, there are way more than 101 tools. In fact, patriji, who's going to be joining us on Monday on awaketvnetwork.live, shared with me even a new form of meditation that I had never tried before, despite having been meditating for over 7 years. So when I talk about 101 spiritual tools, these are not the only spiritual tools. Since the beginning of time, we've been exploring different ways to connect to Source, God, the universe, light, whatever you choose to call it. The tools that I share in these books are tools from my personal experience, tools that I've learned from teachers like Patriji, teachers like my teachers at the Kabbalah Center, like Moche. So today we're going to delve into these. I'm going to take you kind of on a little journey of some of the tools. Book 1 has 11 tools, and each of the subsequent books is going to have 10 tools each. And one of the cool things that I would invite everybody to check out is if you go to 101spiritualtools.com, go to the blog, and in the only blog article I've written so far for it is every single resource, over 100 resources, from free meditations to some of the different techniques that I talk about in the book, such as soul talking, heart talking, some really great free videos from HeartMath. So if you get nothing else out of today, just know that there are 100 resources waiting for you there. And that can honestly be some of the biggest obstacle for some people when it comes to finding your spiritual path. I heard some of the people speaking before I came on about their path and finding their truth and their meditation. Some people need to know where to go. Some people need to know the why of why to go there. So today we're going to be sharing with you, you have the where to go. There's already all those resources listed there for you on that website. And today I'm going to be sharing with you personal stories of some of the techniques that I've used and some of the ways that it's helped expand my own consciousness. Now, before I get into one of my favorite techniques, which is called soul talking, I want to pause for 30 seconds. In book 2, one of my other favorite tools that I do is called intentions, and we could spend a whole hour just talking about intentions. As any of you know, before you meditate, before you practice yoga, before we do anything, before we breathe, when we set an intention, it expands the possibility of our consciousness. So I invite you to take the next 30 seconds and to set an intention out of what you are intending to get out of this conversation today. It could be anything. It could be happiness, prosperity. Maybe it's something physical that you want. Maybe it's a soulmate. Create whatever possibility you want for yourself. And I'm going to hold the space and intend that whatever you want is made manifest out of that intention you're creating today. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds and we're going to allow a couple of conscious loving breaths and then we'll continue. Perfect. So now if some of you are still writing your intentions, continue to be with that. And I'm going to invite you to play with me on the concept of the soul. Before we can talk about soul talking, we first need to discuss what is the soul. Now, I wish I could tell you definitively the soul is this and it exists here. Although, as you know, philosophers, scientists, spiritual leaders have been researching and arguing about what the soul is or the soul is not since the beginning of time. So for today, so you have a context for what I'm talking about when I say soul talking, I'm going to share with you what I consider to be the soul for me personally. For me, the soul is the still, quiet, soft voice, and it radiates from our heart. If you're ever wondering, am I hearing my soul or am I hearing one of the other voices in my head? I don't know about you guys, but I know we all have at least two voices, if not more, one of our ego and one of our soul, and sometimes some other little voices in there, our teachers who maybe berated us, our parents who we did or didn't get along with, but that's a discussion for another time. What I'm most interested in right now is not the megaphone voice, the voice that is on loudspeaker telling you you did this wrong, this person could have done this better, that's always judging and evaluating. I'm talking about that soft voice that you need to clear out all of the clutter and the noise to be able to hear. Imagine back in the day, some of you might be too young to remember this, but for those of us who grew up and had those televisions with kind of the white and black ants and the static all over it, that's most of us are going around in life and we can't hear our own soul, let alone the soul of somebody else, because of the fact that there's so much noise out there. The great news is, though, by doing things like meditation, breathing, you're connecting to the stillness and the quiet and the ability to tune in, just like you tune into a radio channel or to a TV channel, to tune in to the frequency of your soul. So, Kabbalistically speaking, there's actually one of my favorite Kabbalah teachers who I've been lucky enough to have worked with over the last 5 years or so, David Guillaume, who hosts a weekly podcast called Weekly Energy Boost, which, by the way, I highly recommend. It's the only podcast I personally listen to. And in fact, David, for those of you who are interested in learning about Kabbalah, is a quick aside, he's hosting a global Kabbalah 1 class starting this Monday night for, I think, 8 weeks. For any amount you want to donate. So if you go to the Kabbalah website, you can find that. So David and the Kabbalists came up with a concept called proactive confrontation. Why do we suffer in life? We suffer in life because we and the people around us are filled with so much static and noise that we are reacting rather than responding to one another. Somebody asks us for something and we bounce off and we get reactive, we yell, we shout, or we shut down and we don't express ourselves. So one of the techniques that the Kabbalists talk about is this idea of proactive confrontation, which I'm going to tell you in a moment why I've now termed it soul talking. Step number 1 is that if you have a meeting, if you're about to sit down with your children, with a colleague, with a friend, and you know that you might be having an emotionally charged conversation, pause. It is with the power of pause that we create a space. Just like a child cannot be born without the space of a mother's womb, nor can we create the miracles that we want in our lives and the lives of others without first creating a space to contain that miracle. So by pausing, we've now just created a space and we've brought consciousness and awareness to it. And as a little side note, something one of my other favorite teachers, Arthur Joseph, teaches me is a great way to create space is to do what he terms allowing a conscious, loving breath. When we allow that breath and we combine that with the power of a pause, we now have just enhanced our space. You can almost feel it as you allow a breath. There's this softness and this spaciousness that opens up. So imagine that you're now walking into a discussion with a loved one, with a friend, with a colleague, with your boss, and you've paused. Step number 2 is to connect to your heart and to ask from your heart to the other person's heart, is this person available to receive what I'm about to say to them? If you did nothing else, if you paused and if you asked yourself, you just asked, is this person available to receive whatever I'm about to say to them, to email to them, to talk to them about? That is half the battle of life. We would literally reduce conflict by over 50% worldwide if we did those 2 steps. Here's where it becomes really fun. So you've now paused, you've asked if the other person is available to receive it. A very important 3rd step is, if you hear from your heart, no, they are not available to receive it. And it seems like this might be a daunting task to begin to hear your soul and the soul of somebody else. It actually is easier than you would think. It just takes practice. Like anything else, it becomes a habit and bring consciousness and awareness. So you ask if the person's available, and if they say no, pause again, and wait for better timing. So often it does no good. If you go in and you say, hey, is this person available to receive what I'm about to share? And the answer is no, and you still plow forward like a bull in a china shop, that's not going to do anybody any good either. So then if the answer is no, you pause longer and wait for better timing and continue to talk to the person's soul to see when they are available for it. However, if the answer is yes, it becomes a lot of fun. I'll share with you a story recently. So I was writing this book here in London, and it turned out I have a friend who lives here in London, and we became friends during my stay here. And we would go for social distancing walks, and I actually gave her a copy of the book 101 Spiritual Tools to help review it and read it as I was going through the writing process. So one day we're getting ready for our socially distanced walk in the park, and she said, Jen, I was reading the book in the section in the book called Soul Talking. I'd like you to talk to my soul. Now, when I say talking to somebody's soul, you're starting off by asking simple yes and no questions. Is this person available to receive what I'm about to say? Yes or no? Easy enough. What I've found, though, and the reason I transformed it from proactive confrontation, which is what the Kabbalists call it, to soul talking, is I've noticed the more that we do this, the more that you receive information beyond just yes and no answers. So this friend and I sit down, and I was a little taken aback. I had never actually asked somebody to soul talk or had somebody ask me to soul talk with them, nor was I even quite clear I could do it. It had just been kind of happening naturally with different people from time to time. And so we sat down on a bench, and I tapped in. And one of the ways that we soul talk is we pause, we ask if the person's available. And I got that there was something going on with her heart, that there was pain in her heart. And I was kind of laughing at myself. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm kind of new to this, but, I'm hearing that there's something going on with your heart. And she went on to share with me that over the last 5 days, she had been having this extreme pain. And as you begin to soul talk to somebody, soul talking could also be akin to listening very deeply. When we listen really deeply for all the things that aren't being said, all the things that are in the space between you and another person, you can literally pluck the information right out of the space and begin to engage with people in a more intimate, dynamic level. So this whole conversation continued, and it wound up being a beautiful, profound conversation. And there was another circumstance in a personal development class that I was in where I was talking to a gentleman who I had never spoken with in the class before. And I asked him if he was going to do the advanced class. And first I asked his soul, and I heard yes, he wanted to, but that he had reservations. And then I verbally asked him, and he said yes. And I could tell he kind of shut down a little. So I kind of asked him, what would he want to get out of this next personal development class? And he said, I would want to do something with mental health. And in that moment, I heard back from his soul, it was about his family and to ask him about his sister. And when I did, he went white as a sheet. He said, how do you know it's about my sister? I said, it's kind of funny. Your soul just told me that. So I share this with you because when we learn to listen to our own souls and listen to the souls of others, we can begin to really have more intimate, deep, conscious, loving relationships with ourselves and with other people. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, we're too caught up in our own judgments and self-evaluations to be able to engage in that. Another concept, which I'll lightly touch on in the book, is called heart talking. I'm not sure if many of you out there have heard of or are familiar with the HeartMath Institute, though I've been fortunate enough to get to know them over the last 6 months during COVID. We did a special on Awake TV Network with them, and I'd highly recommend checking out their work. They actually study the science behind the heart. Now, about 6-7 years ago, I was working with my business coach, Julian Adler. And Julian Adler and I were on a conversation. We would do our Monday night business coaching calls. And I remember clear as day, Jules said to me, he said, Jen, do you want me to teach you how to speak to your heart? And I kind of laughed and I rolled my eyes over the phone. I said, give me a break, really? I mean, at that point, I was still exploring my own spirituality and a little bit reticent and perhaps incredulous about such things. And he said, no, really, Jen, I would love to teach you how to listen to your own heart. Now, for those of you tuning in, I do invite you to pause if you're not open to graphic content, because the example he gave me to teach me how to do it is very powerful. It will teach you immediately how to listen to your body, to listen to your heart. And it's also like a gut punch. So stay with me if you're game for it. If you're courageous and you want to stay here, I'm about to give it to you. So Jules says to me, Jen, do you like puppies and kittens? And I laugh. I love puppies and kittens. And I said, yeah, of course. So he said, I want you to imagine a basket overflowing with puppies and kittens. And this is the best thing ever. And he said, great, Jen, where do you feel that in your body? And I said, it's so funny. I said puppies and kittens, and my little poodle just walked over here. So I said, I feel it, Julian, in my heart. And it feels like this beautiful warmth flooding up my heart. And he said, great, Jen. And he said, I want you to now imagine that same basket of puppies and kittens. And I want you to imagine it run over by a car. I was angry. I was so mad at him. I was ready to end our working relationship at that point. I said, how dare you, Jules? How could you say something like that? It literally felt like somebody had just grabbed my heart and yanked it right down out of my chest. And he said, great, Jen, you now know what a yes and a no feels like in your body. A yes for you, and I want to be clear for every one of you tuning in out there, you're going to have different bodily sensations. There is no right, there is no wrong. I use the puppies and kittens example because as painful as it is to go through, it's actually very, very powerful if you learn to hear the voice of your body and to sense how that feels for you. So for me, a yes felt like this beautiful, expansive feeling upwards in my heart, and a no felt like somebody jerking down. And the great news is, how many times in your life have you ever been confronted with a choice? Do I take this new job? Do I go on this interview? Do I go on this date? Do I not go on this date? And what I found throughout using this technique of heart talking, that as long as I'm of sound body, mind, and spirit, as long as I've been taking care of myself spiritually, drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, I can clearly hear yeses and nos in my heart, which is similar to soul talking, but it's more talking to yourself and talking to your own heart. I do want to give you a caveat though. There have been times where I've lost loved ones. My grandma passed away last year, or I've gone through a hardship. And for any one of us who's going through a hardship, and even heart math would probably agree about this, is that it feels like your heart is actually breaking. And it's not to say you can't tune into your heart during those times, but as I gave the earlier example in soul talking, there's a lot of noise and a lot of background stuff that's going on. So it becomes harder to tune in when you're going through a broken heart. Now, heart talking can be used for any number of things. And as you learn to harness the power of your heart, you begin to have an easy, effortless time in life. You begin to ride the wave of the flow, because instead of resisting things, like the example I gave earlier with Moshe, where we're resisting situations, people, etc., we begin to go in the direction that the wave is going, which leads me into a third topic from the book, pain talking. I have a dear friend of mine who is a world-renowned personal development coach and speaker. She spoke to millions of people from around the world. And years ago, she had told me she went to her doctor and she was having a little bit of trouble speaking. You can imagine speaking to easily 100,000 or more people a year. Her voice is her life and she uses it to transform people. And in her case, she went to the doctor and the doctor said, I'm sorry, I have terrible news, but you have a nodule on your vocal cord. And it was actually a tumor. And what she said is the tumor is on the vocal cord and that we need to do immediate surgery on it. And my friend, being of a spiritual nature herself, said, Doc, I would love it if you could give me 3 months. And the doctor was very upset. He said, no, we need to do this right away. You need to do the surgery immediately. Otherwise, you might lose your voice. And she said, Doctor, just give me 3 months. So 3 months went by, and during that 3-month period, every day my friend would put her right hand, and the right hand is the hand for giving energy. If we're looking to give healing energy to ourselves or someone else, we can use our right hand. And she would put her right hand on her vocal cords, and she would talk to the pain. She would talk to the tumor on her vocal nodes, on her vocal cords. And this went on for 3 months, having no idea if it was having any impact, but she lovingly spoke kindly to this vocal cord. At the end of 3 months, she went back to the doctor. He was irate. He was furious. He said, how could you do this? And she said, do what? He said, you said you would wait for me to do the surgery. And she said, I did, doctor. And he said, no, you didn't, because it's completely gone. How was the tumor removed if you didn't have surgery? And you can imagine that my friend was just as astounded as the doctor was, that instead of going the traditional medicine route, which I'm not saying there are wonderful times to go the traditional medicine route, but instead of going the traditional medicine route, she talked to the pain. She talked to the lesson in the pain. What is the lesson? Why are you here? Trusting with perfect certainty, as the example Moshe gave, when we come down to soul school, we make a deal with the universe that there are lessons that we're meant to learn here. The lesson might come in the form of cancer, divorce, pandemic, whatever it is. And when we talk to it in any number of ways, you can talk to your pain, as my friend did, by putting your right hand on that part of your body. You can talk to your pain by going into a meditative state. You can talk to your pain by praying to your pain, or one of my favorite things to do is to journal with the pain. You can journal with the pain or with the universe and say, "Dear pain, dear God, please help me understand why I'm experiencing this hardship, this loss." And the moment we do that, on the other side of our pain is a miracle. Kabbalistically speaking, this is one of my favorite things the Kabbalists teach. They say that whenever we want something, when we desire something with all of our heart and soul, let's say you want to find your soulmate, you want your dream job, you want your dream house, whatever it might be, there are going to be 3 opportunities. You can call them tests, but I prefer to call them opportunities for your growth and unfoldment. And each one of those 3 opportunities may seem insurmountable. But at the end of those 3 opportunities that you have to overcome parts of yourself that might not be fun to deal with, on the other side of that lies the miracle that you've been waiting for. In my friend's case, it wound up being her soulmate. She had been through a tough divorce before that, and despite being a world-famous, world-renowned speaker, she not only got her health back, but met the man of her dreams and wound up marrying him. We just saw each other recently, a couple of months ago before the pandemic. So I invite you to look for what are the miracles that you're missing in your life? What are the blind spots, the things that you might not be wanting to address? When you learn to talk to your soul, to talk to the soul of others, to embrace the truth of your heart, and to talk to the pain rather than pushing it back and resisting it, you're going to begin to allow miracles to unfold in your life. Now, one of the other tips and topics that I'd love to discuss with you from the book is our thoughts and our filters. In much the same way that we observe our own circumstances through thoughts and certain filters that we might have, this shouldn't be this way, I shouldn't have been laid off, we also observe people through this. Our thoughts are incredibly powerful. And when we learn to harness our thoughts, we can literally manifest anything that we want for ourselves. However, the first step is to begin to observe our thoughts. Many of us go around, and this came up for a lot of people with what's going on around the world right now with Black Lives Matter and all of the riots, and with what's been happening with the protests, is so many people didn't even realize that they were seeing the world through a filter. And it's through not knowing that we're seeing the world through a filter, that's where the danger area comes. So step 1 is to begin to observe, what are the filters that you observe the world through? Do you observe yourself through a filter? Do you observe your family, your culture through a filter? What do you observe through a filter? I'll share with you a story I don't often share, but I feel like it's relevant right now. I did a personal development class back in my 20s, and my dad and I had always had a rocky relationship. My dad drank. He does drink to this day. That's what he does. It's okay. That's kind of who my dad is. And he's a wonderful man. He was a firefighter, never drank on the job, but he was a hero. He would go out there and pull kids out of burning buildings. And we had an agreement in my family that my dad was a jerk. It's like, oh, dad's drinking, it's bad, this is wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And when I was introduced to this concept of filters, I realized that my whole life, I had been seeing my dad through a filter of he was bad, he was wrong, it should not be this way. So one day I sat down with my dad in his garage before he started drinking. And again, it was on the days where he was off, he would drink, which is he had every right to. And I said to him, Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for judging you and for making you wrong for the last 25 years of my life for drinking. I have no idea why you drank or what's going on with you or what you might have seen. And he began to share with me about seeing decapitated children, and pulling them out of burning cars, stuff that most of us can't even fathom. And when that happened, it was almost like the Grinch who stole Christmas. My heart grew 10 times its size. And all of a sudden, I had this overabundance of just love and compassion for my dad. And something really remarkable happened that night. That night, my dad drank. Nothing changed. Nothing changed in terms of my dad. My dad was still the exact same man he was that morning. But my perspective, my filter that I saw my dad through shifted. And that night when he drank, rather than being afraid or judging him or getting angry or sad, I loved him. I saw him through a filter of love. And I'll have you know, my dad cried that night because he got that I loved and I accepted him, drunk or not drunk, it didn't matter. And as this went on, my dad and I developed the most fabulous relationship. We Skype every single day on the phone now. He's built 2 schools with me in third world countries where, of course, he doesn't drink. He goes out there and builds along with the villagers. And it's been a truly transformational experience. So one of the last things I would love to leave you with today is a story I learned from an African shaman at one of my favorite spiritual centers, Agape International Spiritual Center. I was once there and I heard this really powerful African shaman, Ishmael Tete, talking. And he said, every day that we wake up, it's as though we put on a pair of glasses. And those glasses have a filter on them. Most of us don't even realize that we put them on. That filter could be hardship, it's not fair, judgment, loneliness, fear, scarcity colored glasses. He said, what I invite you to do is I invite you to choose. Every day when you wake up, actively choose the glasses that you put on. What if you were to put on gratitude colored glasses? What if no matter what happened to you in a given day, you were able to see the world through a lens of gratitude? And that's actually technique and tool number 8 in the book is gratitude. And in the book, I share a story of how not long after I'd heard Ishmael Tete speak, I was volunteering at a center over by LAX. And I knew that the parking was $4 or $5, and that seemed like a lot of money at the time. So $4 or $5 to park in the legitimate building, or free to park at the cafe across the street, which was supposed to be for customers only. And I left that building that day, and I noticed that my car was not in the parking lot where I'd left it at the cafe. And when I went and asked the owner, he pointed to the sign that says, parking for customers only, violators will be towed. And rather than being judgmental, cynical, angry, bitter in that moment, I laughed. I fist bumped the universe. I'm like, oh, universe, I got it. You're teaching me a lesson in accountability. And I was able to see the world through a place of gratitude that day and to be grateful that I had enough money to get my car out of the tow truck, that I could walk to where my car had been towed to, and that I had that opportunity for a lesson in accountability.
Yes, that was absolutely wonderful wisdom sharing, Jennifer. That was really wonderful. The information you shared was absolutely priceless. Thank you very much for that. There's many points that particularly resonates with me, and out of which the last point which you shared with the glasses of gratitude, that is something which I kind of practice every day, and I think you have touched upon it so beautifully. And other points like listening to your heart and listening to your soul. I think it's very surprising because last week I was actually thinking about listening to the soul. How do you actually listen to the soul? And I think I can see now the universe is actually listening, and the answers is something that you have given me. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jennifer. It was really a great pleasure to have you today. We still have some time, Jennifer. Do you still want to continue to say something? We absolutely love listening to you.
Absolutely. If you guys would like, I can leave you with one of the other techniques that I didn't get a chance to touch on.
Please. Yeah.
And it's called spiritual accounting. So when we end our days, we're going to the other side. We're giving our soul a chance to go to the dream world. And one of the most powerful things that we can do is to reflect on how could we have lived today better? Like imagine, a lot of people have said that this time during the pandemic has been a lot like Groundhog Day, right? We're going through the same motions over and over again. Well, that's great news. That means that you have a do-over each and every day, that you could do life completely differently. So a technique that I like to suggest for people before we go to bed every night is look at your day and not from a lens of judgment. You could even do it, to your point, but do it from a place of gratitude, is to ask yourself, how could I have lived today better? Were there moments to share that perhaps I missed out on? Were there moments where I was reactive or where I was selfish or where I rushed? I know for myself, it's kind of funny if I'm being totally honest. The thing that I work on almost every day and have not yet transformed is rushing through things. I get very excited and energetic. And so oftentimes I find myself before I go to bed saying, wow, where could I have slowed down? Where could I have paused? Where could I have been the person I wanted to be rather than doing the things I thought I needed to do? And I think that's a really important distinction. The other fun thing about this, so you start off with, how could I have lived today better? And then the second part is something that I know I struggled with when I first started this practice about 3 years ago, is you ask yourself, what am I proud of myself for? What am I really proud of myself for? Did I restrict having that piece of cheesecake I really wanted? I don't know about you guys. I'm here in London and there was this fabulous cheesecake that I really wanted this morning and I totally restricted. That's going on my list today. But, did I pause and did I slow down? Did I soul talk with somebody before having a challenging conversation? Was I grateful? Did I push myself outside of my limits? And then one of the other things that we didn't fully get an opportunity to get into today is gratitude. So the last thing I do before I go to bed every night is I list at least 3 things I'm grateful for. In that moment, what am I grateful for? Having been in third world countries and having had literally no roof over my head or no toilet, there are a lot of things, that I took for granted in the past that I no longer take for granted, or even for all of us right now in the midst of COVID and the pandemic. The little things that we used to take for granted, like seeing our friends, going out to restaurants, there are these and so many more things that we can be grateful for. So I love to start every day with the top 10 things I'm grateful for, and then finish my day with, how could I have lived today better? What am I proud of myself for? And 3 more things I'm grateful for. And if you want bonus stars and bonus points, you can actually put your right hand on your heart and acknowledge yourself as you say the things you're proud of yourself for. I'm so proud of you, or I'm so proud of you, Jennifer Hill, that you restricted from having that piece of really good cheesecake in the window, whatever it is. And so I just invite everybody to play with it. It can be a lot of fun to utilize those techniques in your day-to-day life.
Wonderful.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Well, I was just going to say that everything that you share is so simple, but yet so profound. And we forget that every single day as we go on, and especially in these times. Thank you for sharing that. Really, really grateful, Jennifer, for coming on and honoring us with your presence today. And I wanted to ask a couple of questions, though.
Please, go right ahead.
So the first thing that you mentioned was, how, the first thing is mentioned that we need to pause. The first step is to pause, listen to your heart, and then ask a question about what is coming up.
Yeah.
But most of the people even cannot get to that first step, pausing. What would you say? What would you say that can help them or support in that process? Like to remind that, okay, you know what, you need to pause. Is that a practice that you built? How would we get started on that?
Failing over and over again. And that's why I love doing the exercise at the end to tie it back into spiritual accounting. You want to give yourself permission to fail. You are not going to get it right. To this day, I would be lying if I said I paused before every conversation. I am proud of myself when I get it 30 or 40%, of pausing during the day. And every time that you have a small little win, celebrate it, reward yourself. You could use even some of Pavlov or old techniques. Give yourself chocolate, whatever it takes. If you reward yourself, allow yourself to have popcorn. That's one of my favorite things. It's like popcorn and butter. If I do something I'm proud of myself for, popcorn, a movie, chocolate, celebrate the wins and have other people around you. That's another really important practice, to have teachers, mentors, friends, or accountability buddies.
Right.
I have a teacher, Arthur Joseph, who I've worked with now for over 7 years, and he will remind me, he'll say, Jen, just allow a breath. It's okay to be right where you are. And he may have to, if we're doing a lesson, he may have to remind me 10 times in that lesson, but there's another 10 breaths where I was present and I was there. So it's not about perfection. It's about doing the best you can. And in fact, my significant other gave a great example. He did Kung Fu for many years. And he said, Jen, I would totally screw it up. When we would do the flips, the somersaults, I would do a somersault and I would land flat on my back and it would hurt like hell. But you know what? I would be the first one in line to do it again and I would fall on my back again and again until finally it just felt easy and effortless and I could flip over. But it takes a lot of times of falling on your back to be successful at it.
Wonderful. That's truly the most important point is that practice. Just we need to believe that it's okay even if you fail, it's okay. But yet getting up and practicing that again and again every day.
Exactly. It's like meditation.
Right, right. And the second thing you touched about was healing, the self-healing part of how we can heal ourselves, which I think was very profound. And also the whole of Pyramid Spiritual Society's movement. We are all in this mission of teaching or talking spreading the message that we can heal ourselves by just being centered, by grounded, by knowing the power which is within. And you very profoundly talked about how our like just talking to ourselves we heal ourselves, and the example that you gave is so amazing. Tell me about in your life how much like do you practice of healing, like what exact steps do you do if you get a cold cough or things like that? What do you do first?
Brilliant question, Pari. So a couple of things. I have a body talk doctor named Jeannie Elmstrom, who's amazing and doesn't even have to see you in person. And she's been treating me remotely for 10 years. So the first thing I do is that. I also do pause and I ask my body what it needs. And I've noticed that that's why I actually didn't have the cheesecake, is because sugar, I know my body doesn't resonate. It's a catch-22 funny story about that. My inner child, and inner child is number 9, the tool number 9 in the book. You get to know what matters to you. You begin to talk to yourself. So you can talk to your pain. You can also talk to your little girl or your little boy and begin to find out what he or she needs. You could even do it with a pause thing. You could say, hey, sweetheart, or hey, buddy, what do you need? How can I best support you to pause more? And the irony is, one day I was struggling because I don't personally eat a lot of sugar, but my inner child loves it. Like that's how she feels loved. She loves like ice cream and that sort of stuff. So sometimes it's almost like somebody's banging at the door saying, you're ignoring me. And one of my friends, Shannon Leichner, who's a business partner, but incredible intuitive, she said, Jen, when was the first time that you remember really like craving sugar? And Pari, I could remember it from when I was a little girl. I was 6 years old, going off my grandparents' diving board. And every time I got a perfect dive, my grandfather would give me a chocolate mint chip. And so I didn't realize that this whole time my inner child feels loved when she gets sweets, which didn't even seem to be in alignment with who I am as an adult because it's not something I normally think about. And the more that we begin to do this inner work, to talk to ourselves, as I mentioned, one of my favorite techniques is to pray or meditate. I always ask, what's the lesson? What is the experience that you want me to learn from this? Because I'm clear, I'm certain that this is for the good. When we judge a thing as bad, oh, this is bad, this is happening. I'll be totally straight with you, Pari. I've been having an opportunity to heal myself with my thyroid. I have interesting thyroid things happening and ran out of my medication in London, which was quite a fun experience in the middle of the pandemic. And so what I started doing is I would ask my thyroid, hey, how can I heal you back to life? What do you need? I love you. And my thyroid every day says, slow down. And that's why I mentioned the slow down thing. But it's also, to your point, listening to it and creating a habit out of slowing down so it becomes a practice rather than something you reactively do or don't do.
Right. Amazing. And the next very common question, maybe you get this a lot as well, is you mentioned about the tools that, we have this access to these tools that we don't have to struggle in our lives. We can totally live in a happy state by using these tools. But most of the times, and then you also mentioned that you meditate, you pray for 2 to 4 hours a day. When I talk to, people who are new, one thing they say is, I don't have time. Time is something, I'm so busy doing this. I have my family, my work, my things to do, and we have 3 minutes. I really want you to talk about this, like people who are new to this, because we are reaching to masses here today. And how can we inspire them to start getting into these spiritual tools?
Oh, I love that part. This is one of my favorite things to teach people because I was that person. I was like, I'm so busy, which, by the way, I would encourage people to replace busy with my life is filled with miracles and abundance. Because when we say busy, busy happens. So that's a whole other thing. And we get into that in the book of the power of our words that we use and how they do manifest our reality. But to your point, there's an exercise my mentor and friend Arthur Joseph taught me called the 168-hour exercise. You, me, everyone on this planet, we all have the same amount of time, 168 hours. It depends on how much thoughtfulness and consciousness you have about those hours. So a fun exercise I would invite everybody to do is to write down your 168 hours. What do you do with those hours? From brushing your teeth, spending time with family, watching television, going to the loo, whatever it might look like. Write that down. And when I did this exercise about 6 years ago, I became Superwoman, literally, because I realized that I had 8 extra hours in a week that were unaccounted for. And you begin to be kind of like Doctor Strange from Marvel, where you can just manipulate time and space. But the problem is, we live in a world where it's a confined world of, I don't have enough, scarcity mindset. So start with 1 minute. Allow yourself the honor of 1 minute a day. We all can carve out 1 minute. 1 minute of breathing. In fact, a fun exercise from a friend of mine, Sister Jenna, she suggests at the top of every hour, she has an alarm for 1 minute, allow a breath, be in stillness, and then expand it to 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And if you ever want to, I love to do 24 hours of stillness on tomorrow, actually. That's how we learn to harness the power of our heart and soul, is to spend that time with no cell phones, no social media, no noise, and that's how we learn to tune in deeply.
Wow, wonderful. Well, the one thing that I think I would want to say is please, everybody, go get this book, 101 Spiritual Tools. I am totally intrigued now. I need to go read that book. um,
Thank you.
and also, I wanted to mention about the Monday interview on Awaken TV, awakentv.com, right? Correct?
Yeah, it's Awake TV Network.live, and patriji is going to be joining us, facilitating our Monday experience. It'll be at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. traditional European time, and then you're joining us the following week on July 20th.
Yes, I'll be there on July 20th. So so I would ask all the viewers to please go and check it out. And there are many other meditations by other masters. So this is a global meditation, global unity platform that all the leaders are coming together and leading these meditations. And anything else you want to share before we close this session, Jennifer?
It's so funny. I check with Source, and it's like kind of like soul talking with the world. And the message I just got is to love yourself. And one thing I would recommend is a technique where every single day, look yourself in the mirror and say, I love you. That's something that takes 5 seconds, and that will transform your life.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.